Are you excited for Call of Duty Black Ops 7?
What is this shit?
Me neither. Yeah, Call of Duty has come under a lot of scrutiny lately with the past few entries. Honestly, there is so much discourse at the moment around Call of Duty. Stuff about movement, the story, the skins, which I've talked about before. God forbid we even mention skill-based matchmaking. But one thing that I don't see very many people talk about is the Killstreaks. Killstreaks have been a staple of the Call of Duty series almost since the beginning. They're pretty much synonymous with the entire series, but have you ever really stopped to think about them and how they function as a game mechanic? Because I have, and after thinking about it for a little bit, I'm starting to think that maybe they're part of the problem too. It's time to actually look at Killstreaks critically as a game mechanic in this series. So, before I go any further, I want to clarify that I do not work for Activision, nor do I work for Infinity Ward or Treyarch or Sledgehammer or any of the other Call of Duty affiliate studios. I cannot say for certainty why Killstreaks were added as a mechanic in the original Modern Warfare. I can, however, give my best educated guess, which is as follows. So Infinity Ward is hard at work on the fourth entry in the Call of Duty series, and this time they want to go in a much different direction than what they had done before. The first three games were all set in World War II and were fairly grounded, missing a lot of the key features that people think about nowadays when they think of Call of Duty. So for this new game, they wanted to shake things up with the gameplay, not only by setting the game in modern day, but also by introducing plenty of new game mechanics to increase customization and have more variance between matches. One of these ideas is to increase the action in each match by giving players access to vehicles and other special abilities. But this raises the question, how do you implement something like that? I mean, Call of Duty is only 6v6, and these maps aren't the biggest, so how exactly are you going to fit planes and tanks and stuff? In large-scale games like Battlefield or Battlefront, a single match can have dozens of players fighting on huge, sprawling maps, so you have a lot of physical room to add in vehicles and other combat, aside from just boots-on-the-ground gunplay. But with Call of Duty, it's so small scale that how exactly are you going to fit everything in? Well, you're going to need to make it something special that can only be called in at certain times. Well, how do you do that? You want it to be something that players can earn relatively consistently, but also not something they can earn too consistently so that it completely obliterates any sense of balance. In other words, they need to feel limited, but still powerful and rewarding when you earn them. Thus, the Killstreak system was born, where upon reaching certain thresholds of kills without dying, you will be awarded with different utilities. Originally, there were only 3. At 3 kills, you get a UAV, at 5 kills, you get an airstrike, and at 7 kills, you get an attack helicopter. Sure, it's not much variety, but it was balanced to an extent. Since every player has the exact same access to the exact same 3 kill streaks, the game is very heavily balanced around this fact. Ghosts as a perk would not exist without the existence of the UAV. And without helicopters to shoot down, rocket launchers would serve essentially zero purpose other than being obnoxious noob tubes. And the great thing is, people loved it. The original Modern Warfare was super popular, and the Killstreaks I think played a major part in that. It was something unique that had never really been seen before in the shooter space. Which of course meant that when time came around to make Modern Warfare 2, they figured now was the time to really expand on this concept and make it something even crazier. The Killstreaks in Modern Warfare 2 are, in one word, ridiculous. For one, there are now several different options. No 2 players will be running the same streaks, most likely. And oh yeah, that helicopter from before, the best thing that you could earn in a match, yeah, that's like a mid-tier streak now. Now the actual high-tier streaks are some absurd bullshit. Of course, all of these additions have made the matches even more chaotic and action-packed than before, but I think that infamous chaos is what contributed to Modern Warfare 2's success, and is widely regarded as one of the best in the series. So yes, while killstreaks are still popular at this point, the cracks are starting to show, even in this early state, which leads me to my main point about this video. So yeah, killstreaks are not perfect, and really very few game mechanics are, but killstreaks present some major issues that I think have had more ramifications on the Call of Duty series than more people give credit for. Firstly, killstreaks prioritize kills more than anything else, which means that they only really work and make sense in team deathmatch. In every other game mode, while yes, kills are important in order to maintain control over the map or certain objectives, it's not the end-all be-all. Having access to these high-powered kill streaks only if you've gotten kills really restricts what you can do in a match. It also unfortunately reinforces the behavior amongst the Call of Duty community that is basically obsessed with KD as the ultimate stat that represents your skill, when really, that's not necessarily the case. Secondly, kill streaks, especially in Modern Warfare 2 and beyond, tend to be very snowbally. Some of the higher tier streaks, and even sub-mid tier streaks, tend to be so powerful that in order to take them down as the opposing team, you're going to end up dying a lot, and that just does not feel good. Not to mention that most tools that are effective at taking out kill streaks are fairly weak and situational otherwise, so you're essentially taking up and wasting some of your loadout slots in order to take out streaks that you don't even want to deal with in the first place. Even worse, in some of the earlier iterations especially, having those mid and higher tier streaks come out could completely overtake the match and basically swing it entirely in the favor of one team. This issue was somewhat rectified in future games by not having kills from kill streaks lead to further kill streaks, but the problem still persists because once someone calls in a super duper attack helicopter or plane or whatever, they pretty much get free reign over the map for the next minute or so. And that leads to the final major problem, and that is the fact that these kill streaks are just not that fun for most players other than the user. Obviously, yes, going up against a ton of kill streaks called in by the other team is not very fun at all, and in fact can feel very toxic depending on what the kill streaks are. But I think another underappreciated aspect is how it affects other team members of the person that called in the kill streaks. If you're playing in a match and you're trying to do the objectives, get kills and that kind of stuff, interact with other players, it is a multiplayer game, but then one of your teammates calls in a gunship and is just mowing down the entire enemy team before they can do anything, then what's left for you to do? Nothing, more or less. Just sit back and watch the fireworks, I guess, but is that really fun? Usually when those high tier streaks come out, people like to hide and play super safe, which is, again, not very fun for everyone else, because now they're having to deal with other people camping. Of course, this is only made worse by the fact that kill streaks are less of a reward for staying alive and more of a punishment for dying. It doesn't matter if your KD is positive at the end of the game. If you never got a kill streak higher than 3, you're not getting anything. You can come out of a game 30-10, but if you only went 3 kills for every death, then all you're getting is a UAV. So did that player carry the match, or the player that went 15-15 but went on an 8-player kill streak at one point and called in a helicopter to get the rest? Who's the better player? Who should get the reward there? That's what I mean by it being a punishment for dying, which of course leads to many players playing very, very safe once they feel like they have a good chance of getting some kill streaks. And by safe, I mean camping. There's probably very little that COD players hate more than camping, and for good reason. It's not very fun. Having someone just sit in a corner or behind cover and just shoot at you from afar with snipers or burst you down with a shotgun before you can even react, it's just not fun. But guess what? Kill streaks kind of reward that behavior, because how else are you going to get streaks easily unless you play super safe? Sure, you can be aggressive and get kill streaks, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it takes no skill to get kill streaks. What I am saying is that it encourages a type of play that is kind of counterintuitive to how the rest of the series is designed. I can't speak for everyone, but in my experience with recent COD games, for the most part, as soon as someone calls in a high-tier streak, like a attack helicopter or a gunship or something like that, most people in a match just leave, just straight up. And honestly, I don't blame them. Usually I do too, because it's just not really worth dealing with when I can just hop into another match and keep having fun. And with no enemies in the game to actually use your kill streaks on, then what's the point of the kill streaks? Maybe if they had a little more counterplay or some other ways to play around them other than just dying over and over again, then people wouldn't feel so helpless once they get called in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The other issue with kill streaks is skill-based matchmaking. Now look, skill-based matchmaking is a very divisive topic, and I can make a whole other video on that, but that is not what we're talking about today. So regardless of how you feel about skill-based matchmaking personally, the fact is that they have been implementing it more and more in recent games. And the problem, therefore, is that skill-based matchmaking and kill streaks are completely at odds with each other. One mechanic is rewarding players for doing better than the others by giving them more powerful tools in order to dominate their opponents even more, while the other mechanic is intended to pit players together of equal or similar skills so that they can have a more balanced match and no one runs away with a crazy KD or score or anything. You see the problem? You can't really have one while having the other. If you're going to have skill-based matchmaking in your regular matches, then killstreaks don't really work, because no one can call them in consistently. And if you're going to have killstreaks as a major gameplay mechanic, then putting players together of similar skill is just going to make it all the more frustrating when one player gets a lucky break and gets to call in some crazy helicopter or something. If I haven't made it clear already, the issue with killstreaks is that they're not just an isolated problem. They affect a lot of other aspects of the game that I don't think people realize. The way maps are designed, the weapons, the perks, how the matchmaking and other more meta systems work. All of those have to revolve around killstreaks because they're such an overwhelming mechanic in the game. And if they're not, well, then they start to just feel like an afterthought. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Well, you've been talking about killstreaks this whole time. Well, what about the scorestreaks? Yes, the scorestreaks are a legitimate improvement over the traditional killstreak system. And I will take scorestreaks over killstreaks almost any day. But that's also like saying I would rather lay on a bed of spikes than a bed that's on fire. Funnily enough, Infinity Ward was actually the first to experiment with this type of scorestreak system, starting with Modern Warfare 3, where you had the Pointstreaks. This was very similar to killstreaks, but with the difference being that certain actions would actually count as a point as if you had a kill. These include getting multiple assists, capturing the flag, capturing an objective in domination, and so on. Black Ops 2, of course, took this idea and then expanded on it quite a bit by introducing the Scorestreak system, where now almost any action you take as a player in a match gives you some amount of score. Obviously, kills give you the most score, but doing things like playing the objective will get you much more score consistently and allow you to get score streaks much more often than you could with kill streaks playing in a mode like Hardpoint or Domination before. And yes, I should stress, this system is an improvement. But frankly, it's not enough to fully salvage it because the main problems still persist. Yes, you can get points from playing objectives, but most of the points you're getting towards score streaks are coming from kills. Plus, it still does not fix the fact that it's still more of a punishment for dying than it is a reward for staying alive. Sure, you can play the objective and get points towards your score streak, but how long is that going to work when you get gibbed instantly by all the frag grenades thrown at you in Hardpoint? It is better, but the problems are too fundamental to be fixed with just a simple point switch like that. Speaking of which, the other way that score streaks have been attempted to be rebalanced over the years is by making them more expensive overall. If you look at some of the score thresholds for older kill streaks, like in Modern Warfare 2 or the first Black Ops, they seem pretty absurd by today's standards. Like, you can get some of these things really early, whereas nowadays, especially with score streaks, it takes a lot of points to get some of these streaks. I understand why they did this. They wanted to make score streaks more difficult to get for most players so that they feel more rewarding when you do, and to make matches less of a chaotic shit show. But ironically, I think it's actually made the problem a little bit worse, because now by putting all of these streaks more out of reach for average players, it's only made it feel more unfair when players do get them, because now they just get to have free reign that you'll never really get to have if you're not some god tier player. So what can they do? If you remember earlier, I said that this idea is not the first time it's been done for first-person shooters. I want to explore that a little more and talk about how other sort of subgenres within shooters handle this type of mechanic. In arena shooters, you have something called special weapons. These are powerful weapons that spawn at set intervals at designated spots on the map. Any player can grab a special weapon and then use it to their heart's content. But the key is that they don't make you invincible or anything. You can still die while holding a special weapon, drop it, and then another player can take it from you. Essentially, these special weapons, both as they're spawning and as they're being used by a player that's already picked it up, essentially serve as little pseudo-objectives that player can fight over, even in something simple like Team Deathmatch. It gives players more of a reason to battle for control over the map. You want to have a dominating position over other players so that you can take full advantage of a special weapon that you may or may not get. The system also works well because it gives plenty of opportunity for counterplay. Because other players can kill you and take your weapon, it gives a lot more variation to each match, as it sort of becomes a tug-of-war of who's trying to hold on to which weapon the longest. Personally, I think an idea like this could work in Call of Duty. I mean, they already have sort of special weapons, stuff like the minigun, flamethrower, grenade launcher. I think even things like an airstrike could work as little objectives that you can pick up and then use against your enemies. Now, this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's also worth bringing up is the money in Counterstrike. For those that have never played Counterstrike or other similar tactical shooters like Valorant, as you kill other players and perform objectives, you gain money. You can then spend that money to purchase more powerful weapons and utility. Now, on paper, this seems like a pretty heavy snowball mechanic, because obviously the better team can buy better and better weapons and then steamroll the other team to get even more money. But just like arena shooters with the special weapons, you don't become invincible as you buy better gear. In fact, most tactical shooters have fairly low time to kill, so the other team can kill you pretty easily and then take your stuff. Again, just like arena shooters. This gives a degree of counterplay between the two teams as it becomes, again, a sort of tug-of-war between them as you try to balance getting good gear but also not letting your opponents get their hands on them. Of course, the other thing with money in a game like Counter-Strike or Valorant is that it is very baked into the core gameplay of the game. Like, the entire game is balanced around the money. The economy in Counter-Strike is a huge deal. No, not that economy. The in-game economy. You know what I mean. An idea somewhat similar to this would be Star Wars Battlefront 2, the new one. As you play in a match, you unlock credits, and then once you die, you can spend those credits to respawn as more powerful characters, including the iconic heroes or villains. Now, admittedly, this system isn't perfect because teams are so large, but the heroes are so limited in how many can be on the field at once. It can feel almost impossible to get a hero, even if you're doing really well, unless you just get really lucky with the timing. But it is something to consider. It maybe could work for another mode where you can earn credits and then spend them on powerful utility to use on your enemies. Sort of like how the Killstreaks work in the recent Zombies modes. The other one, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this, is the super abilities from hero shooters. These super abilities tend to work on a very high cooldown, so you can only use it once every couple minutes or so. But because of that, all players will have a chance to use their super at some point. Now, most of the time in games with supers, they tend to operate on some sort of charge system, where as you deal more damage or get more kills or something like that, it'll charge up faster. So naturally, more skilled players will be able to earn their super and use it more effectively more often. And of course, like everything else I've been talking about, these supers also usually present some sort of counterplay to them. You can either kill the person or the object that they're using, whatever it may be. They're not just a summon this thing and kill everyone. They usually have some sort of obvious counterplay that could be worked around for the other team. Now, for what it's worth, Call of Duty actually did do a system like this at one point in Black Ops 3 and 4, but it didn't really work out for a couple of reasons. A, they still kept the Killstreaks, so now all of a sudden giving people free access to these special weapons that can just obliterate people in one shot feels a lot more unfair because it's leading into a separate kill streak that they'll use against you later. Plus, a lot of the super abilities they came up with for Black Ops 3 and 4 are just kind of boring automatic kill buttons. They don't have a whole lot of counterplay. It's just, oh, I get an automatic grenade launcher now. So now the entire map gets blown up. Like, I don't think the idea is inherently flawed for Call of Duty necessarily. It just has to be implemented purposefully. Now, there is one more example that I want to bring up, and that is Titanfall. For those of you that aren't familiar, which I'm assuming is many of you, Titanfall was the series that Respawn Entertainment worked on before they created Apex Legends. Respawn Entertainment itself was actually made up of a bunch of former Call of Duty devs. So you can almost think of this series as a sort of spiritual successor to Call of Duty, even though it's still going on, but you know what I mean. Anyone who's played these games will probably agree with me on this. The Titans in Titanfall are everything that the Call of Duty Killstreaks wish they could be. Not only are they powerful vehicles that you can spawn in the match, being able to spawn them faster if you're doing well, but they also give a really interesting dynamic to the game. You see, these Titans, yes, they are powerful and they can pretty easily mow down the regular players. Because of the way the maps are designed and the advanced movement opportunities of the Titanless pilots, it's not as easy as you'd think. Plus, since everyone can summon their Titan, it essentially adds a whole other layer to the match, where you have the Titanless pilots running around and doing run and gun like normal, while you have the pilots in their Titans duking it out with each other on the big open spaces in the map. And these Titans aren't just point, click, and kill things. They actually have their own abilities and unique weapons. They're fun to use. They have variants to them. Plus, for the Titanless pilots running around, they actually have a lot of ways that they can counterplay these Titans. If you get up close enough, you can actually latch onto the Titan itself and sabotage its power cores, greatly reducing its health. Or you can use your anti-Titan weapon, which comes for free with every loadout, and tend to do their job fairly well if you know what you're doing. It feels natural and purposeful, and it gives some variance to the gameplay that is already really good on its own. This is what Killstreaks should be. They should be something that enhances the game and makes it feel more exciting and like there's some other objective that you're fighting for, as opposed to just, oh, I got some kills, now let me call this in and get more kills. Now, I do actually have some other ideas of how they can treat Killstreaks going forward. I'm not going to say these are perfect, but I think it's something that can be considered. For one thing, if Killstreaks are going to stay around, then maybe it's time to actually go back to kind of how they were in Modern Warfare 2. I know that sounds like going backwards a little bit, but if you're going to have these Killstreaks in games making them more chaotic, then just embrace the chaos. Let more people earn them. Make them easier to counter. Like, it should not take more than one rocket to take down a helicopter, let's be real. So make them easier to obtain and more fun to play around. Related to that, I think it would be wise to add more interactions between the Killstreaks. One of the things that's always bothered me is the fact that once one player has called in something like a helicopter, no other player can call in another helicopter or aerial streak until it's done. I get why this is done for balancing purposes. You don't want one team calling in 5 helicopters to just completely destroy the entire map. But I think upping the limit a little bit would go a long way to make them feel more interesting. Like, imagine if 2 people on opposite teams called in attack helicopters, and then those attack helicopters started fighting each other. You have this really interesting aerial battle happening in the sky, and then you can help out your own helicopter by shooting the other. Hell, they don't even have to be on equal footing. Imagine if you put down a sentry gun, and then it saw another player's kill streak up in the sky, and it started shooting at it. I think adding more interactions between Killstreaks like this would go a long way to make them feel a lot more rewarding and interesting to use. The other thing they could do is revisit some ideas that they've played with in the past. I sort of glossed over this, but another thing that Modern Warfare 3 added was the idea of the support streaks. Basically, the whole idea is that they don't reset on death, but your killstreak selection is basically limited to all of the utility support stuff. So you're not calling in helicopters, you're calling in UAVs, recon devices, and other stuff like that. It might be worthwhile to revisit this idea. Another idea I think would be worth revisiting is the customizable streaks like in Advanced Warfare. I know that might raise some red flags for people since I know the Scorestreaks in Advanced Warfare were kind of disliked overall, but I think there is some genuine potential in the idea of having a smaller selection of different types of streaks, but then allowing you to customize them in your own way. The idea is there, it just needs a better execution. Finally, I think especially if they're going to stick with this whole skill-based matchmaking thing, it might be worthwhile to start introducing some alternative modes that don't have kill streaks. Do something like this. Have one playlist that is the classic Call of Duty 6v6 action, complete with kill streaks, limited skill-based matchmaking, the works. Then have a separate mode that maybe has smaller scale teams, like 4v4 or something, more objective-based modes, no kill streaks, and tighter skill-based matchmaking. Honestly, that sounds like a great compromise and a way to keep kill streaks in the game, but also offer players an opportunity to play without them. Modern Call of Duty is stale enough as it is. At this point, either go for a truly classic experience and treat kill streaks like how they were in the past, or just do something new. This middle ground that they're trying to do is agonizing to watch and play. Just pick one or the other. But hey, that's just my thoughts on Killstreaks. If you have any thoughts of your own, don't be afraid to leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you liked this video, please leave a like. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. I'm Nova Star Kyle, and I will see you next time.